Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and I'm taking care of business. Joining me today is Shaun Cathcart, who is Senior Economist with the Canadian Real Estate Association. Thanks for joining us today, Shaun.
Thanks for having me, Mario.
Well, the CREA put out an interesting report today. It's monthly data from December and actually for the whole year. What's quite interesting about this, obviously, is the record low of inventory in Canada for homes for sale. Tell me and maybe explain how low it is these days throughout the country.
Sure. Well, I mean, the thing about stock variables and flow variables is that they're hard to compare. So the overall inventory of homes that are left on the market at the end of the month is a stock variable. So it's always going to seem like a big number compared to a monthly sale number or something. But having said that, on New Year's Day, 2022, I think there was something like 67,500 listings on the market all over Canada. So like every pin on the map, which is the lowest number ever recorded. Now that's a little bit of a, as you know, having dealt with these numbers forever, housing data is quite seasonal. New Year's Day is sort of the lowest of the low from the yearly standpoint. So you might think it's a bit disingenuous to say like, well, it's a record low, but even on a seasonally adjusted basis, something like 85,000, I think we're at about right now on a seasonally adjusted basis. 7 years ago, that was 250,000. So that's a record low too. And so, and it just keeps falling. And so that's where we are to start 2022.
Why are we seeing such a record low of inventory across the country?
Because, well, there's a lot of reasons, right? Like I'll give you three. In the last 10 years, all the millennials have gone from their 20s to their 30s. International immigration numbers have been setting records. COVID is a bit of an illusion there, but that's going to, picture 10 years from now and looking back, it's going to be like a step function permanently. And we stopped building single family friendly homes. The missing middle's still missing 10 years later. And we're building all kinds of small condo units, which are, that's important too, but seems like the only thing we're building and calling them all units and wondering why all of these young families are so frustrated. So that's why. And so when you're not building new homes that people need, the demography need at the moment, it gets all absorbed out of the existing inventory, which there's a lot of, not a lot of it for sale, but what is for sale gets sort of scooped up, and that's where we are.
And that's leads us into demand. Obviously, we ended the year in 2021 with a record number of sales, just under 667,000 across the country. Can you talk a little bit about demand in this country and why? You would think that during a pandemic, during economic times that are challenging, uncertain, that people may be hesitant to make the biggest single, financial decision they would probably make in their entire lives. Yet they're flying off like crazy, homes in this country. Why?
Well, the thing about needing a place to put down roots and in a good school zone and raise your family is kind of mechanical for a lot of people. You can't wait until you're 50 to do that. You're not going to do it when you're 15. We've got a big group of demography who are in their 30s right now who are looking to do that. That's one. International immigration tends to fill that 25 to 45 age group as well. So that's your sort of first-time home buyers. That's your absorption of inventory without sort of putting one back on. And then the other wild card in the pandemic has been people that were in their forever home, right? That they would have been living in say Midtown Toronto or whatever it is for the next 30 years, who because of the pandemic have pulled up stakes and moved around with all the equity that they have and are just trading. So I would call that churn. Just in terms of the numbers that we can calculate, the listings that come up and then the sales that go up is, people that are moving from, you've heard the stories, right? Toronto to Halifax, Calgary to Kamloops, whatever it is, back to where the grandparents are, back to where I grew up. If I don't have to pay a premium to be on a square of ground in a city that's close to some downtown building that I don't commute to anymore, or I don't have to if I don't want to, or I'm going to retire early or whatever it is, you can move and get an even bigger house on a bigger piece of land and downsize yourself right out of a mortgage payment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a real secular thing. It's something we've never seen before. And so it's sort of hard to wrap your head around for that reason. But a lot of people are moving around. The StatCan numbers show that. And I think that's going to continue.
Do you also think the pandemic has fueled the demand? Obviously, by people like myself, I work from home exclusively, right? So there's a lot more of remote work out there where people are based out of their homes now. Maybe they're looking at their homes and deciding, well, maybe I need another home if I'm going to be working from home now for the rest of my life.
Well, like a lot of people have, it's funny that, if you think back to sort of 40 years ago, a house price was a house price, it was the price of the house. But in a lot of downtown areas of big cities, it's sort of a $200,000, 60-year-old bungalow on an $800,000 piece of ground. And if being in that location doesn't matter as much to you anymore because you don't commute, you can cash that in and go somewhere else and live. I mean, and like the StatCan data from an interprovincial migration standpoint, it's at record levels. So we know that people are moving around at record levels. It appears that they're moving from central Canada out towards the coasts. So I've been saying, hey, like, where do you go on vacation? You go to the cottage, you go to the lake, you go to the ocean, you go skiing. Why not do that year round? Why only do that for 1 week of the year if you can work over an internet connection? And so, and good for them, good for those people. Like, I've known a lot of people, obviously, over my time that moved to the big cities for school and stayed for work. But this childhood friends, the grandparents, a lot of these millennials are having kids now. The grandparents are in some other place, and all of a sudden we have this opportunity to go back there. It's great and good for them. And so you're definitely seeing the price premium on land is definitely getting spread out more across the country, with people not having to be as close to downtown cores anymore as they used to, or not as many people anyway.
Yeah. Let's talk about prices for a second here. A record year-over-year growth throughout Canada, 26.6%. Obviously, I take it as probably a supply-demand issue, right? Low supply, high demand creates higher prices.
For sure, that's exactly what it is. We've got to start the year, we've got 1.6 months of inventory. So if you divide the overall stock of listings on New Year's Day by sales in the month of December, which is how we calculate it, 1.6. A normal market would be 5 or more. Wow. And that's just to keep pace with inflation, or even better. So that would be a middle of the road Goldilocks market. A buyer's market would be 6 or 7. We're at 1.6 nationally. So you can imagine, if you think back to what happened in sort of Southern Ontario in sort of 2016, 17, just before the Fair Housing Plan came in and sort of crushed that psychology temporarily. It's sort of, imagine that spread across the entire country, because there were so many other places in the country that were undergoing that same pattern, but at a much slower rate. And so this slow burn that sort of goes under the radar that people didn't notice, and then all of a sudden it reappeared sort of 6 months or so before COVID. And I think one of the maybe mistakes that some people make, COVID's certainly a factor, but we would have been mostly in this situation anyway. COVID just gave it a big kick in the pants. So, after having had it be held back by something like the stress test, where it's like, okay, we're okay, there's nothing going on here. Really, it's just sort of disguising an issue that's percolating under the surface. And so here we are, and that's where we are.
All right, Shaun, for last question for you, when you look at the rest of this year, what's the outlook for sales and prices in Canada?
So the outlook, so our forecast currently for sales is, I think it's in the 600,000 range. So lower than the 2021 number, above everything else in history. But sort of going back to trend, you'd expect that to sort of go up over time, and it overshoots and it undershoots. And so we're expecting sort of a trend year. It's hard to forecast because we've never faced this kind of supply shortage. So the demand is there. The demand is definitely there to have 700, 800,000 sales.
Wow.
If the listings were there, but the problem is that the supply isn't there. And so it's all going to overflow again on the price side. Our forecast currently is 7.5% increase over and above 2021 and 2022. You know, if I'm honest, I think that if I had to give odds over under, it'd be more likely to be over that, given the current situation. Particularly given the fact that, with interest rates rising, you keep in mind that, Canadian borrowers and lenders paid the price for the current tightening cycle of interest rates 4 years ago when they brought the stress test in. That was the point, right? And so that's going to be a cushion. It's everything. It's all the other debt that's going to suffer more over the next year as opposed to housing, because people are already qualifying at 250, 300 basis points above what they're getting. So, it could be another headline grabber of a year for housing, unfortunately. And I don't like to deliver that news. I wish that there was all kinds of great missing middle homes for people to buy and own freehold and raise their families in, but there aren't. And so the conversation we're striking the right tone now, but talking about it's the easy part, right? So I guess we're going to have to get everyone together to figure out how to get these things built now. Yeah,
no kidding. Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Shaun, for joining us today.
Sure, no problem. Anytime.
All right. That was Shaun Cathcart, who is senior economist with the Canadian Real Estate Association. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.